Biden giveth, Biden taketh away with his new crime proposal for 2021. U.S. Supreme Court tells U.S. cops you need a warrant to enter houses. Premise Data app wants you to spy. Miami's Skyline is falling, or is it just another pulled tower? Sperm counts are falling too. Where have all the non-hybrid cannabis flowers gone? Hollywood celebs launch another star high school in LA, and Elon Musk asks, what chips with that? Brain chips, that is. Everything is topsy-turvy. The seeds of change are hybrids, but the facts are always organic and real in this installment of the Balanced Reality Report. In the scheme of politics, it's give and take, quid pro quo, cause and effect. Biden signed the federal Juneteenth holiday law into effect, and while too many people were distracted by the hollow holiday gesture, he now plans to roll out a new crime bill 2021. His crime prevention proposal has a lot of buried nuggets in the rhetoric, somewhat like one of those omnibus bills. He is expected to renew his call for gun legislation, more cops on the streets in so-called high crime areas, and tougher sentences for violent crimes, among other items. Notice how this was not a big story in so-called popular media.
A new issue has pushed its way on to President Biden's agenda tonight, the current rise in violent crime, including homicides in the United States, especially crime involving guns. He laid out his proposals today for what to do about it. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor reports.
Today at the White House, President Biden called the uptick in gun violence in America unacceptable.
We need to keep building on the gun violence and crime prevention strategy we're laying out today. Folks, this shouldn't be a red or blue issue. It's an American issue. We're not changing the Constitution. We're enforcing it, being reasonable. We're taking on the bad actors doing bad and dangerous things in our communities and to our country.
The president announced a 5-part plan. It is aimed at tackling gun violence and other violent crimes by using funds from the American Rescue Plan. Some of the initiatives in the plan include giving money to cities to hire more law enforcement officials, including past pre-pandemic levels, buy new equipment and technology for police departments, help formerly incarcerated individuals re-enter society, use resources to hold gun dealers accountable, and invest in community violence intervention programs. Over the past year, major cities, such as New York City, have seen a spike in violent crime, including shootings.
Every time you turn on the news, there's killings, nothing but killings, or someone getting beaten up or someone getting shot.
The New York Times reported that homicide rates in large cities around the U.S. were up by more than 30% on average last year and are rising significantly again this year. Meanwhile, ahead of the midterm elections, conservatives are capitalizing on this issue and ramping up pressure on Democrats.
It's impossible to ignore that these terrible trends are coming precisely as so-called progressives have decided it's time to denounce and defund local law enforcement.
That includes former President Donald Trump, who spoke at North Carolina's Republican convention earlier this month.
Look at what's happening where they're defunding the police.
President Biden has said over and over again that he does not support defunding the police. In the meantime, the Biden administration's new crime plan has some activists concerned about increasing tension between police and communities of color, especially after last year's murder of George Floyd. They're also worried a crackdown on crime may lead to even more mass incarceration.
They must be taken off the street.
That's what happened after the 1994 crime bill, which then Senator Biden supported. White House officials, though, insist that will not happen this time around. The 1994 law imposed harsher federal prison terms, including mandatory sentencing, and it provided funding for states to build more prisons and increase policing. The legislation has been criticized for its contributions to mass incarceration targeting Black Americans. As the Biden administration lays out their plan to curb shootings and homicides, some activists are sounding the alarm about the unintended consequences. But White House officials tell NewsHour President Biden is not focused on arresting his way out of this problem. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Yamiche Alcindor.
As we do with all so-called popular media reports, time to break it down and expose what was not said by looking at what was said. First of all, the reporter said Biden, when he was senator, supported the 1994 crime bill. Correction, my dear. Of course he supported it. He devised and drafted it. And I've got proof. But wait, there's more. Remember I said there are buried nuggets hidden in the rhetoric of Biden's crime-fighting prevention plan? The biggest hidden nugget is buried in the words community violence intervention programs. Guess what? Community violence intervention programs, in addition to involving increased police presence, also includes jail and prison intervention programs. In order to fund these types of programs, a state has to prove it has the numbers, as in inmates. How do you get those inmates? Yeah. Now for that proof that Biden drafted and supported his own 94 crime bill, and he gladly will do it again, which is what he is doing. Again, here he is during a candid interview with CNBC.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, "I'm ashamed that I voted for the 94 crime bill." You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
And by the way, we talk about this mostly in terms of Black Lives Matter. Black lives really do matter. But the problem is institutional racism in America. That's the overarching problem that still exists. And we should be talking about it. And you look at it, the legacy of racism in housing and jobs and so on. But having said that, if you take a look at the crime bill, of the money in the crime bill, the vast majority went to reducing sentences, diverting people from going to jail for drug offenses into what I came up with, the drug courts, providing for boot camps instead of sending people to prison so you didn't relearn whatever the bad thing that got you there in the first place. Put 100,000 cops in the street. When community policing was working, neighborhoods were not only safer, but they were more harmonious. And when the reason why the cops originally opposed my 100,000 cops for this community policing piece is because it's high intensive and it means they got to get out of their cars. So they literally got out of their cars and learned who owned the local drugstore, the local neighborhood bar, whatever. And they were engaged in the neighborhood, which built confidence so that the woman, the African-American woman living in a corner alone where the drug deal's going down in front of her house knows she literally used to have your phone number as a cop. She'd call you and say, "John, they're out in front of my house, but you're not giving me away, right, John?" No. And it didn't. So we had enormous success. Now what's happened is we've cut the funding 85%. We've gone out there and we're going through Baltimore now. Look at the areas we're going through here. I'll lay you 8 to 5. The Baltimore Police Department is considerably smaller than it was in 1985. There are things I would change. I opposed, for example, the carjacking provision that the administration wanted in. But by and large, what it really did, it restored American cities.
The U.S. Supreme Court restricts police powers to enter a home without a warrant. You may remember, just 7 years ago, certain types of warrantless searches of homes and even personal property, like cell phones, was okayed by the Supreme Court. However, last Wednesday, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a unanimous opinion in the case of Caniglia versus Strom. In that case, the police entered and searched a home after a female called the police to do a wellness check on her estranged husband, who she had quarreled with a day earlier. The husband agreed to go with ambulance to hospital for a psych evaluation, under one condition, that the cops did not enter and search his house. Of course, the cops entered and searched his house, and they found a gun. Attorneys for the husband sued. Attorneys for the cops used something called the Community Caretaking Doctrine as a defense. The doctrine came out of the 1973 case of Katie versus Dombrowski. Under this supposedly narrow legal exception called the Community Caretaking Doctrine, cops are allowed to breach private property, like searching disabled vehicles or responding to home emergencies in order to protect public health and safety. Security in the home, which is supposedly one's castle, is, among other things, defined by who you allow into your home. These so-called legal loopholes or exceptions are interpreted broadly by police and policing agencies, and this diminishes your constitutional protections. Preface this so-called update to the U.S. Supreme Court decision with one of many violations of the law by cops. For example, 2 youths were sexually assaulted by police. They were Aboriginal males, and after being exposed naked in public and having their genitals literally violated in broad daylight as a mixed audience recorded the shakedown, police then entered the victim's home and searched it without a warrant. Like many uninformed Aboriginals, they accepted and settled for a paltry amount of hush money, which you'll hear about in this CBS News report.
And tonight, disturbing video has surfaced of a police officer in Baton Rouge strip searching a 16-year-old and his older brother during a traffic stop in broad daylight. That officer is now under investigation, and we warn you, the video is hard to watch. Here's CBS's Jeff Pegues.
There's at least 3 or 4 people in the car.
Within minutes after a traffic stop on New Year's Day in 2020, Clarence Green is standing in the street behind an SUV with his pants down and his underwear exposed.
Hey,
stop.
Come on, bro. You can't do that, bro.
I can.
The officer groping him in public in a search for drugs. And then Green's 16-year-old brother is searched in the same manner.
Come on.
Thomas Frampton is the Green family attorney.
I think what's captured in the video bears a closer resemblance to sexual assault than it does to constitutional policing. The officers involved were clearly outside the bounds of anything that the Supreme Court has said is permissible for law enforcement officers to do.
Later, body camera footage shows an officer entering the Green family home with his gun drawn and without a warrant. Officers did find a gun in the search, and Clarence Green ended up spending 5 months in jail until a judge ordered his immediate release, after determining that officers demonstrated a serious and wanton disregard for the defendant's constitutional rights.
You think I'm playing with you? I will you up.
Tonight, the Baton Rouge Police Department told us that it had conducted an internal investigation, but the officers involved in the incident remain on the job.
We're not going to dirty your clothes.
It will be up to the police chief to decide whether the officers will face any sort of discipline.
I think there's a lot of work there to be done by the chief of the Baton Rouge Police Department to determine if policies and procedures were followed. If they were not, then disciplinary action should follow.
Nora, it turns out the police reports in the investigation had been revised nearly a dozen times. The family did file a federal lawsuit but settled for $35,000.
Jeff Pegues, thank you.
Meanwhile, is Miami's skyline falling, or is it just a sign or an after effect of years of corruption in Miami's construction industry? A rescue operation is underway and has been for the last 2 days in Miami-Dade County, Florida, USA, after a 12-story residential building partially collapsed, killing an unknown number of residents. Rescuers have been combing the rubble, searching for any trapped survivors. So far, just a handful of survivors have been pulled from the debris. Among them was a small boy on the first night. At least 8 people are known injured. The collapse is said to have occurred at about 2 a.m. or 6 o'clock GMT. Also unknown is how many people were inside the building at the time of the collapse. Police and rescue have set up an area where they can exchange information with family members of residents who are still unaccounted. BBC reported on the tragedy, and here's what they had to say.
Major rescue operation is underway in Miami in Florida after an apartment block partially collapsed. It's believed at least one person has died. A 10-year-old boy, though, has been rescued. The local fire service says 80 emergency vehicles were sent to the scene. It's not clear how or why the 12-story residential building, built in 1981 and containing more than 130 units, came down, or indeed how many people were in it at the time. What we do know, though, is it came down overnight in an area called Surfside, just north of Miami Beach. James Reynolds has the latest.
Amid the rubble of the apartment building, fire crews managed to find a young survivor. He's able to climb out himself. In an undamaged section, firefighters take an older resident to safety. No one yet knows how many others may be trapped in the wreckage of the block, which is called Champlain Towers South. It partially collapsed in the middle of the night.
I looked out the window and you couldn't see. I thought it was like a storm or something coming in. And then when the dust cleared, there was the back half of the building, or back 2/3 of the building was gone. It's down to the ground.
It looks like a whole, just from the top to bottom, section of the building just collapsed. It's crazy. I mean, you think something you've seen in a earthquake or something.
This video was posted by the resident of a nearby hotel. The Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department has sent more than 80 fire and rescue trucks to the scene. The oceanfront building, which was constructed in 1981, is in the Surfside area of Miami. That's just north of Miami Beach. The neighborhood is home to many retired people. Many only live there in the winter. In daylight, the damage is evident. Structures in this area have to be built to withstand hurricanes. So why this building partly came down is not yet clear. People from the building and from surrounding areas have been taken to a holding area, whilst everyone waits to find out more. James Reynolds, BBC News.
Even though the partially collapsed condo was built back in the 80s, was this a case of shoddy construction or another instance of dirty dealings and insurance fraud? Perhaps the owners of the structure had it pulled. Where have we heard that term used before in the past? With another set of tall buildings that came collapsing down in a cloud of concrete dust. Miami is as humid as it is full of corrupt politicians, construction companies, developers, bankers, real estate agencies, judges, police, and so on. This is not to say that other cities and towns are not corrupt also, but Miami has a special brand of corruption, partially due to its location. It's a world-renowned city, and it has a history of corruption, especially when it comes to certain industries, like construction, and so-called development contractors. In the 80s, when that partially collapsed condo was built, the saying was that 99% of the high-rise buildings, commercial or residential, were built with Coke money. Coke as in cocaine, not Koch brothers. Every dirty criminal organization has its tentacles in Miami, especially in construction, from Medellin, Colombia, to Tel Aviv, Israel, to Moscow, Russia, Hong Kong, China, and Mexico City, Mexico. It's a United Nations of crime gangs and greedy, murderous moguls and mogulettes. The end result to all this corruption is rampant money laundering, shady deals that fund shoddy construction and get permits without question, and buy subpar materials at high-end prices. Add dirty judges and attorneys to this mix and you have the perfect criminal enterprise where there is no state or federal oversight or investigations. When there are arrests or fines, jail time and fines are often mere slaps on the wrist for the fall guys, while those behind the scenes continue on doing dirty business as usual. Take, for example, the string of Miami Beach building department employees caught taking bribes from a scandal-tainted developer back in 2005 to 2007. One buildings department employee, Mohammed Partovi, pled guilty, agreeing to serve 18 months in jail. Partovi, 54, pled guilty to 2 counts of unlawful compensation for accepting a Rolex watch in cash from Michael Stern, a mob-connected Miami Beach developer who was repeatedly accused of fraud and forgery in lawsuits relating to his real estate business. Partovi, a Miami Beach plans examiner, accepted the gifts between 2005 and 2007 to expedite plans for Stern's proposed demolition of a historic 95-year-old Coral Rock house on Collins Avenue. Partovi conducted a structural review of wall shoring work at the house and signed off on a permit. Also convicted in the case was Andres Villarreal, a city building inspector who pled guilty for accepting $100,000 from Stern, while the developer was seeking approval to demolish the historic Coral Rock house. Villarreal was sentenced to 18 months in jail also, and 3 years probation. Our sources uncovered that he may have served only 4 months, with the rest of his sentence being served on probation. Miami-Dade prosecutors also charged city planner Henry Johnson with accepting at least $17,500 in bribes from Stern, including $4,000 stuffed inside a magazine. Johnson pled guilty and was sentenced to 15 months. Naturally, you should be asking yourself, but what about the dirty so-called developer Michael Stern? Did he serve any time or get charged with fines? No, he never served jail time nor received any fines. In fact, the historic building that he got approval to demolish from city officials app was partially demolished and stayed that way for years to follow. As Stern abandoned the project, nothing was done. So, no court orders were issued to force Stern to clean up the mess he made or rebuild the historic building that his company had partially destroyed. Allegedly, the scandal sparked reforms by city administration, which hired a consultant to recommend anti-corruption measures. The changes included reorganizing the building department, simplifying how fees were determined, and changing how building plans were reviewed. You may have never heard of Premise Data Corp, but Premise Data Corp is accused of gathering intel from unwitting app users in conflict volatile countries. A recent article written by Del Cameron on Gizmodo.com busted or outed Premise Data Corp, a San Francisco tech company paid millions by the US military to turn an army of overseas cell phone users into a sweeping open source intelligence network, gleaning data from cell phone towers and Wi-Fi hotspots in countries long engulfed by armed conflict with American forces and allies. Citing federal spending records and other documents, including interviews with former employees, the Wall Street Journal reported last Thursday that Premise Data Corp, a firm launched in 2013, has pitched a range of defense agencies on turning a global network of gig workers into unwitting home-based intelligence gatherers across as many as 43 foreign countries. A trip to Android Play Store, where all of NSA's, Android apps are downloaded by billions of people each day, reveals that the Premise app is quite popular, despite its below average 3.9 user rating. The Gizmodo article states that Premise Task app is only available in 43 countries, but that the company claims the list is growing. A search on YouTube reveals that many of Premise app users reside in countries like Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, and even Germany, just to name some of the 43 countries. Geography aside, the app is basically Pokemon Go meets Agent 007's Vietnamese girlfriend, but this idea of using unsuspecting civilians to collect data on themselves and the world around them is nothing new. In fact, that's what social media was designed for. According to the Gizmodo article, users have also been tasked with collecting data on wireless signals and other cell phones, a practice that Premise likens to efforts by Google and Apple to map Wi-Fi networks. While this information has obvious inherent value for U.S. intelligence, the company's chief executive, Maury Blackman, sought to downplay its consequence, saying the practice is neither unique nor a secret. Even Premise CEO Maury Blackman was not troubled nor evasive about the obvious inherent value of this user-collected data for U.S. intelligence, saying the practice is neither unique nor secret. Interesting. The ever-decreasing human sperm count made the news again. It's not like this has not been a feature story on science segments of news programs, but what's new is a book titled Countdown on the Waning Fertility Crisis by environmental and reproductive epidemiologist Shanna Swan. In the book, Swan and co-author Stacy Colino explore how modern life is threatening human survival, changing male and female reproductive development, and endangering human life. The current state of reproductive affairs can't continue much longer without threatening human survival, Swan says.
Shanna Swan is a leading environmental and reproductive epidemiologist and professor of environmental and public health at the Icahn School of Medicine at New York City's Mount Sinai Hospital. She's been studying the impact of chemicals found in everyday products like plastics and electronics on infertility. I spoke with her recently about her latest book, Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. So what are those chemicals found in, around us? How are we interacting with them? And what is the risk that they pose during conception and in utero?
So first of all, which chemicals? I focused on a class of chemicals called phthalates, and these are chemicals, a pretty big class, that make plastic soft and flexible. also present in cosmetics and personal care products, room fresheners, and anything fragranced. These chemicals have the ability to lower testosterone. And I did a series of studies to look for it in humans. Other chemicals involved that are important is bisphenol A, the bisphenols, which are estrogenic and also interfere with reproduction and neurodevelopment and lots of things in our bodies. And then there are other classes of chemicals in pesticides and flame retardants, in PFAS. And basically, these are things in all of our lives all of the time.
You know, I know in the title of the book, you're looking at sperm counts, but you spend several chapters on just fertility overall, that men and women are facing challenges to fertility, and it's happening, relatively speaking, when you think of human evolution, in the blink of an eye in 30 or 40 years.
It's happening to men and women, and as well, I should add, non-human species. And what we see is that the decline in the number of children that people have is 1% per year worldwide over the past 50 years. That's true of developed countries and underdeveloped countries. And the same rate of decline, 1% per year, is what we see for the decline in sperm count, what we see for the decline in testosterone, we see for the increase in miscarriage risks. And we've examined in our book, Countdown, how each of these endpoints is deteriorating, if you will, at the same rate, about 1% per year, which is another bit of evidence, although not conclusive, that these are related to a common cause.
Are there other factors that could account for this general decline in birth rate or replacement rate that we talk about?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that social factors, personal choice, play an important role. But there's also no doubt in my mind that these chemicals also play a role. One of the telling things is that it's not just older people that are having trouble. Young women today at 25 are less fertile than women their grandmothers were when they were 45. And we see that with men as well. Their sperm counts are below what their grandfathers was.
What's the long-term consequence here? We don't have any magic wand that's going to stop all the chemicals that are around us from being around us. Look out into the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Well, it doesn't look good, but I hope we do have a magic wand. I think that we have the ability to change the chemicals that are around us, and I think we have to do it pretty quickly. I think we need these products for our daily lives. We're used to them, we want them, and so they have to be made with safer chemicals. And we have to have legislation and regulation that ensures that the chemicals that go into these products are safer for us. But it does take a huge effort, and it takes people understanding the problem, recognizing the problem, committing to taking action. And that's what I'm hoping Countdown will do.
Shauna Swan of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. The book is called Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Harry. Nice to be here.
Perhaps that's why those biolabs back in the 70s began collecting and freezing sperm in sperm banks, just in case the males of the human species became infertile. There are no coincidences. Speaking of seeds in peril, where have all the non-hybrid cannabis plants gone? According to an article by freelance writer and media consultant on cannabis, Dante Jordan, there are basically no true indicas nor sativas being sold in North America. Everything is hybrid, despite what you're being told by shop owners and sales clerks and marketing pitches. In his article on weedmaps.com, Jordan states that foreign cannabis hybrids were introduced into the North American soils mainly by way of California. He writes, quote, "In the 1960s and 1970s, these foreign genetics began making their ways over and into the outdoor soils of California. This is when we began seeing the hazes and strains of the world appear. As cannabis cultivation matured, all of these different types of strains were hybridized for their desirable genetic traits. such as large yields, high THC percentages, and resilience during growing, in an attempt to make strains with specific characteristics become super strains. That's why, nearly 2 centuries after the indica and sativa classifications were created, there are no true sativa and indicas left in cultivation rooms or dispensary shelves today. Hybridization is an ancient horticultural method of breeding desired characteristics in plants. It's also done in animals. But is there a danger of too much customizing? Of course there is, and that's what Jordan seems to be hinting at in his article. Note he is not referring to organic growing methods. Hybrid strains can be grown organically or using toxic substances like pesticides and growth enhancers. There are, however, seed vaults in countries like Denmark, Sweden, Russia, and Canada, where these non-hybrids are stored for future safeguarding and perhaps reintroduction, probably in biodomes or something similar. Jordan warns that to find true sativa or indica genetics, you have to trace these strains all the way back to Afghani and Durban genetics in the lineages. And when it comes to finding those oldie strains, there isn't anything you can do commercially with them because of the emphasis that the industry puts on THC content. And that's where either seed vaults come into the picture or nature manipulators like Monsanto. Everybody wants to get into the act. And that's the old saying from that big-nosed comedian from the early 20th century. Remember previously on the Balanced Reality Report, it was Dr. Dre and James Iovine teaming up with LA School District to launch a magnet high school that focused on the arts for Aboriginal and other impoverished youth. Well, now it's Don Cheadle, George Clooney, and Kerry Washington, etc., getting in on the act to launch a high school in a primarily Hispanic section of Los Angeles. As opposed to focusing on the performing arts, this high school will focus on the tech side of entertainment, from editing, script writing, cinematography, videography, etc. Very interesting. Tell us more, CBS Los Angeles.
Some celebrities are teaming up with the LAUSD to help underserved communities break into the entertainment industry.
KCAL9's Hermela Aragawi is live in the Westlake District with details on the new magnet school and the A-listers involved. Hermela?
That's right. Hi, Juan and Leslie. The Academy will be located here within the Roy Ball Learning Center. It will be called the Roy Ball School of Film and Television Production. We spoke with some parents in the area, and they say they are excited about this, and they believe it will encourage students who did not think that TV and film were an option for them to tell untold stories. So some of the people that are involved, let's pull up the videos. They're members of the advisory board. It includes actors George Clooney, Don Cheadle, Mindy Kaling, Kerry Washington, some major producers and talent agents, among others. LAUSD says the program will start in the fall of 2022 with 9th and 10th graders first, and then it will expand to 11th and 12th graders in the coming years. George Clooney said, quote, "Our aim is to better reflect the diversity of our country. That means starting early. It means creating high school programs that teach young people about cameras and editing and visual effects and sound and all the career opportunities that the industry has to offer." CAA's co-chair Brian Lord added, "The combination of education and hands-on training opens up life-changing opportunities." And producer and former U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas, Nicole Avant, said everyone involved within this effort understands the needs to create points of access to resources, information, skills, and mentorship. We spoke with a local parent and a UCLA professor about the potential impact of the program.
It's about time in this area, you know. We have so much talent around here. It just, goes unnoticed. And what they need is more opportunities. And I'm glad they're doing something like this.
But one of the things that we often don't pay enough attention to is the impact that entertainment has on society. I mean, Hollywood makes entertaining films and TV shows, but it's not just entertainment. A lot of what we think we know about the people around us, we learn through media.
Professor Hunt there told us he's curious about the application process, whether it will be based on teacher referral, how it will make sure it gets the background and story diversity that it's aiming for, among other questions. Those questions will be answered likely in the coming months. Live in Westlake District, Hermela Aragawi, KCAL 9 News.
Hermela, thank you so much.
I'm just a little curious as to why all this alleged giving and why now. Celebs like George Clooney, Dr. Dre, and certainly James Iovine, who was a billionaire, did not become rich yesterday. They've had the financial resources to launch high schools and more many years ago. So why now is the question. We'll definitely keep you posted and clue you in on any other celebrities who may want to launch a high school. Elon Musk and his marketing people keep pushing his various ventures. The most popular one they've been promoting for the last year or so has been Neuralink. And it's not that he's the epitome of technology nor the provost of prototypes when it comes to AI. Fact is, several other tech-based concerns have been refining brain chip prototypes and may beat the 2040 deadline. Somehow, 2040 is supposedly the big debut date when brain knowledge acquisition chips become all the rage. Musk even started a rumor that he is already chipped with a prototype of his Neuralink. Just less than a decade ago, the programming was anti-chipping. Beware the RFID. They, yes, that ambiguous they, wants to chip everyone through vaccines or nanochips or chemtrails. Do you see how hype works, folks? It's like they say in Hollywood when it comes to celebs seeking to maintain or regain popularity. Even bad press is good press. In other words, it's all controlled programming. All those alleged truther movements who turned out to be ex-military or current letter agency 21 Jump Street undercover podcasters, or even better, the heirs to major blue-chip stock fortunes on three-letter TV networks. Can you say Cooper and Carlson? The point is, all roads lead to Rome, pushing us to want to become chipped, then begging to become chipped, then playing Miami Beach nightclub VIPs only can get chipped. When things go exclusive, that's when the world goes banging at the door to get in on the action. It's right out of the Bernays Goebbels Freud propaganda, public relations handbook. But every smart person knows it's fear and that sense of belonging which incites herd behavior in humans. If people are tricked into believing the only way they can survive in an AI economy is to be able to compete with AI, then they'll push for chipping as if it's a constitutional right. The data transference capabilities of this so-called new technology is nothing more than a weak facsimile of man's inherent but dormant telepathic abilities. Now this from Interesting Engineering.
According to AI experts, brain implants could make learning obsolete in less than 20 years. Instead of reading textbooks or going to school to gather information, we'll have devices in our brains that download information on demand. That may sound like a lot to achieve by 2040, but based on where current technology is, AI expert Nicholas Karanos says the timeline isn't out of reach. A brain implant, also known as a neural implant, is a device often placed on the surface of the brain. It's capable of communicating with your neurons, recording their activity, and even telling them how to behave. One of the most common applications is deep brain stimulation, where electrodes are implanted into the brain to stimulate different areas and reduce the symptoms of brain-based disorders, such as Parkinson's disease or epilepsy. More than 150,000 people globally have received such an implant, but the implants can control neurons in other parts of the body as well. Doctors have used neural implants to stimulate the spinal cord, allowing individuals with paralysis to walk again. Amputees equipped with the implants were able to control robotic prostheses using nothing but their thoughts. Then there's a host of examples that are straight out of sci-fi novels. For example, a team from the University of Pennsylvania's Computational Memory Lab successfully enhanced people's memory capabilities by stimulating brain regions using electrodes. But perhaps one of the most well-known brain implant companies is Elon Musk's Neuralink. The company's ultimate goal is to merge computers with the human brain so that human intelligence can keep pace with advancements in artificial intelligence. Neuralink uses threads in the brain connected to a 4mm chip called the N1. The company recently released a video that appeared to show a 9-year-old monkey equipped with the N1 chip operating a game of Pong using his mind. The N1 chip is just the first step for Neuralink. The team is also developing neural lace, a brain-computer interface technology. The ultra-thin mesh will be inserted via a tiny needle and encompass the brain. The goal of neural lace is to enable humans to upload and download information directly from a computer, much like Neo in The Matrix. Neuralink isn't the only company making headlines in the field. Led by CEO Ramses Al-Kaid, the Neurable team revealed the world's first brain-controlled VR game in 2017. Their device is a wearable that uses 7 scalp electrodes to record electrical signals in the brain. MindX is another brain implant company that aims to create a look and think interface for next-generation spatial computing applications. Users will be able to interact with computers using smart glasses that link with the human brain. The glasses will let wearers access information with a single thought. No more rummaging for your phone to Google a burning question. This is all just the beginning. There's a long way to go with this technology before we all have the option to get chipped, and many hurdles to overcome. After all, major elective brain or spinal surgery is incredibly risky. Still, engineers are working on tiny implants, such as the 0.25 square millimeter neurograins, as well as implants that can travel to the brain via the bloodstream, eliminating the need for open brain surgery. Considering all of this, AI expert Nicholas Karanos may be correct. In the next few decades, would you want to make your brain part machine?
And with that, I now conclude this installment of the Balanced Reality Report. As always, special thanks to field and content producer Chris R., editing by A. Kanak. Balanced Reality Report theme songs by E.O. Haya, featured background music supplied by Arulo, Michael Ramir, Francisco Alvear, Lily J., and of course, the kind folks at mixkit.co. Until next time, this is presenter Pharaoh. And remember, please, to support the report. Just use the links in the description for this medium. Use of any third-party audio clip content is within compliance with the terms of fair use and the Copyright Act of 107. This report has been presented for informational and educational purposes only. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this report for purposes which go beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner.